Welcome, everyone, to another great faculty podcast. My name is Candace Nelson. I'm a teaching and learning specialist here at St. Leo University. And with me today is Dr. Austin Trantham. He is a professor of political science and a valued member of our Faculty Fellows cohort, too. He's been working with AI image generation tools as part of his teaching strategies, and he's come here to talk to us about it. So welcome, Dr. Trantham. Thank you for
Thanks.
being here.
Thanks, Kenneth. It's a real honor and a privilege to be with you today to talk about how AI has really taken my teaching and my pedagogy to the next level.
Awesome. So let's kind of start with like the spark, Every innovation starts somewhere. Can you take us back to the first moment you thought, I think I want to use AI image generation in my classroom? Like that's where I'm going to go. What was that moment like?
Absolutely. So I'll start with a smidge of background so you understand where I was coming from. So in many ways, politics is visual, right? We see pictures of like famous Americans like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, FDR, and Martin Luther King Jr. when we're in school, when we talk about democracy and good governance and the presidency and political history and all that stuff. So, we learn politics kind of equal images early on. And the other, images in American political history are iconic too. You think about World War II and the soldiers raising the flag over Iwo Jima. We think about people celebrating in the late 1980s when the Berlin Wall came down, and then in our more recent times we think about 9/11 and the historic and horrific destruction of the Twin Towers that day. So I'm a visual learner by nature. And so I had previously used images in a class where we talked about the American presidency and its relationship with the mass media. So I showed the class photos of his iconic presidents. So we have Lyndon Johnson with his head on his desk as he's dealing with the Vietnam War and the issues with that and trying to, how do I engage leadership in this way, dealing with that. We have his successor, Richard Nixon, with the famous V for Victory pose as he's leaving office after the Watergate scandal. So politics and images have a close relationship. And so I was using images in this and other courses, but I figured out that it's a one-way street. I was showing the students images, maybe they were discussing it, but it wasn't like they were creating anything. They were just talking about what I was giving them. And so when AI came around, I said, I want to conceptualize this image making as a two-way street. So students can really visually conceptualize these topics as well, as much as I'm doing. So I used AI, as we'll talk about more, on 2 end of the term assignments in my Congress and Scanner classes the last term in the spring 2025. And I felt AI would really allow my students who are daily consumers of visual media, much more so than I was when I was in college, to really ground those lived experiences into an academic setting while developing a broader understanding of how they use images. So they're not just consuming them, they're producing them as well.
I think that's really an important thing to understand too, and that's something as an artist, like there's a difference between when we look at art and we discuss it and then we actually create something. There's like a different part of our brain that kind of switches on. And I think that's really cool that you're kind of bridging art and political science here. So let's like go into the room a little bit. Can you walk us through a moment where you were using the image generation with your students and it just like clicked with them? What surprised you or your students about that?
Yeah, and going back in a second, thinking about being an artist, I'm not an artist. Wish I was not a talent I was given. So for me, I think using AI images, it kind of gets me into the artistic way as well. So that was fun for me. But absolutely. So as I said, the students in my Congress and the Scandal classes were asked to supplement their creative end-of-term assignments with AI um, images. And so in the Congress class, students wrote an original bill on a public policy topic of their choice, healthcare, gun control, education, immigration, whatever they'd like to think more about. And then the assignment required creating AI-based infographic image stating the main points of the bill that they just wrote on. And so they had been working on this a little bit in the class as well to kind of lead up to this final project. And then in the scandal class, those students got to develop their own scandal containment um, plan. So they uh, pretended that they ran a scandal firm, like I chose Scandal on ABC, and they to help a scandal-ridden politician out of a sexual, financial, or power-based scandal. And so they had to write this whole plan about how am I going to deal with the media? What happens if something comes out? How do we deal with those always contingencies? And so I added the AI image base in the beginning of this assignment to create a logo for the firm because I'm thinking if the students go to work, they're working for a company or it's a social media startup, something like that. Like everything needs a logo, and so they have some experience doing that. But the results were really fun. They're really intriguing to me as an educator, and they taught me a few lessons. I was a student almost about how ready our students really are for these types of AI image-based assignments. Some are ready, and some need a little more need to put a bit more thought into it. But I'll talk about that later in our chat.
So what was a particular tool that you used with them? What was the AI tool of choice?
Yeah, we used a lot of things. I let them kind of choose what they want to do after I had demonstrated them. I used Chat GPT. We used Google Gemini. Um, they used Ideogram, and on the assignment instructions, I gave them some screenshots for how to actually use the tools. Even though we talked about it, but and they took to it actually, and we can talk more about that. But they really, I was surprised. I thought they need maybe that was confusing, or I don't know what I'm doing, but being the kind of digital natives that the Gen Z is, I think they really enjoyed it.
That's very cool.
Uh,
So I'm sure that there was kind of a turning point here. So every great story has a moment where something shifts. Was there a moment during the experiment that made you stop and think this is bigger than just a cool tool, like a student insight or an ethical or aesthetic dilemma that came up?
Yeah, I wish I could say there was, Kenneth. I wish I could say it's like, oh, this is where the light bulb clicked on, and all 20 people in the class. So I said, oh my gosh, this is great, right? Didn't get that. Wish I would have. So there was no real like eureka moment. There was no like, oh, here we go. But what I found was almost better because I found a gradual understanding throughout the semester of how AI works, how we use it as a tool and not just in how you use it like in a positive way. So I saw this kind of gradual students really taking a like to it as they got more comfortable with it. Then sort of the this is cool thoughts came out, but yeah, it took some warming up to what we were doing, why we were doing it, why it mattered. Because I think some of them just want to write a paper and kind of call it done. It's like no, you have to add um, this to it'll answer assignment, but B, like there are other um, reasons why, as a college student now going into this workforce, you need to know how to use AI. So
I think that's very true. And I think also developing that logo gives your situation and the assignment a level of immersion. They're not just completing an assignment, they are in the scenario. This, gives it that element of realism, which is fun, it's very fun. And I think it's also quite interesting that it wasn't really a spark or a light bulb switch, but more of a slow acclimation, where you're seeing that AI literacy skill develop over time. And maybe that's a trend we'll see more often, that it's not going to be like a big light bulb switch, but more of a gradual practice, which is very interesting. Um, so for listeners curious about trying this themselves, like maybe developing a logo or using it in their classroom in some way, can you tell us a little more about the tools that you've used and what makes each one distinct in your experience?
sure, Candace, I will do one better. I will show you how they actually work. So I'm going to
Yes.
share my screen. Well, actually, I will show, not tell, right? I'm going to show you how this all works. Let me get it up. Here we go.
I'm
Make
sure
sure
our
my
viewers and listeners would also really appreciate to see the demonstration because I know you've listed a couple
there's a
tools
couple
to me
tools to
that I'm
me.
going to yell about.
Yes. Okay. So all right. So you can see my screen here. This is Google Gemini, and so I asked Google Gemini to create an infographic about a congressional bill titled the Primary and Secondary Education Act of 2025. The bill seeks to increase teacher compensation, reduce student-teacher ratios, and support your professional development and resources for educators. Uh, Please include these three pieces of information in the infographic with an accompanying image for each. And so what I found was the AIs took that last part about having an image for each in different ways, which I thought was interesting. So here's what Gemini gave me. And so, so I was, so in my classroom, I was using it as a student saying, as you're working on your bill, here's your title, here's what you want. So I was kind of using this as an example. Here's what we get if we use Google Gemini. So, okay, we have the Primary and Secondary Education Act of 2025. Oh, increased teacher compensation. Well, first of all, we know that it's not one image. That's interesting. But it says, oh, this bill aims to provide teachers with higher salaries, recognizing their valuable contributions to student success. That makes sense. But wait a second. Here's our image of like somebody getting a paycheck from their boss or something looks like, right? So it's like, wait a second. So we're already questioning um, this tool right off the bat. So here's, okay, reduce student-teacher ratios by lowering the number of students per teacher. This act seeks to create more personalized learning environments and improve educational outcomes. Okay, still, we get this sort of, classroom, maybe first or second grade classroom here, teacher, not what we're wanting, because we're wanting something about politics. And here's our last part here. Let's see if it gets better. Support professional development and resource for educators. Okay, this bill will fund ongoing training, access new technologies, and essential resource to empower educators and enhance teaching quality. That makes sense. But look, oh, it's like we're at an office, we're at a conference, we're at a nice long meeting everyone likes to go to, right? So again, this is not what we're looking for. But it got us, the descriptive text maybe that we want. We can maybe think about how we incorporate the text, but images are not what we're looking for. So um, let's see if Chat GPT does any better. Let's go over to ChatGPT. So here's the full prompt. I can see this on the screen there, and look what we get here. Oh, this is nice. Okay, the Primary and Secondary Education Act of 2025. Oh, we have one image. First of all, that's already a step up from Gemini, but we have increased teacher compensation, reduce student-teacher ratios, and support professional development and resources for educators. So right there, we've got several advantages over what we just saw. We've got one image. We have the descriptive text not as long, so it's not as bulky. It's to the point. We're going to pay teachers more, make their classroom sizes smaller, so they can have more individualized type of student and support them with the resource they need to do their job. So this works, and I was surprised that ChatGPT maybe works this well over some of the other AI like image-based tools. And the nice thing about it is our students are probably going to go to ChatGPT maybe more than Gemini because that's the one that gets talked about a lot. So having them sort of go to this anyway, you'll be more familiar with this isn't a bad thing. But yeah, this looks really nice in my opinion. So yeah, we can use this. So let's go over. So with Chat GPT doing so well, I wanted to see how it would do with the Scandal logo as well. So let's go over to that. Here we go, and I'll read you the prompt. And it's going to come up. There we go. And there we go. It's going to load. All right. So I said create a logo for a Scandal containment firm called Trantham and Associates. The colors red, white, and blue should be used for the logo to reflect the firm's work on political scandals. Additionally, the words honor, trust, and integrity should be included in the logo, ensure that all words are spelled correctly. Yes, I had to add that part at the end about spelling the words correctly. Because if you don't, chat AI may misspell the word scandal. We don't want, and that's a scandal in itself, maybe, but we don't want that. So I did have to make sure you tell AI to spell everything correctly, because if you don't, it doesn't work out so well. So sometimes, but look at this. This is nice. You've got the red, white, and blue. This kind of shield. We're going to protect our clients from their scandal, maybe. So that kind of works. Honor, trust, integrity are at the bottom. Trantham and Associates. Okay, this is very nice. The Chat GPT is a winner in my book. Candace, it really is.
They
Um,
made the fonts too. That's really cool.
I know. Yeah, you had two different fonts. So so if my students created this, and I described the image in their assignment, they could do a lot with this. They could, oh, we got shields, and they could talk about how to the clients are trusting the firm to protect them, things like that. So that's cool. All right, so let's go to Copilot. This is Microsoft's AI, Microsoft 365 Copilot, which we use a lot at St. Leo. So we'll see what Copilot does with the Scandal logo. And it always does this. So we have to see, it will come up. There we go. We have to find the right conversation. There we go. Because I know this is there. There we go. There we go. All right. So same prompt at the top. So Cabral says, I'll try to create that. The logo for Trantham Associates is being generated now and will appear shortly. Let me know if you'd like variations or a specific format for downloads. I do like this. It kind of tells you what it's doing as it's doing it. So that's a nice feature the Copilot has. Okay, let's look at what we have here. All right, so we got Trantham Associates, same kind of shield emblem we had before. Honor, trust, integrity. Everything's spelled correctly. So good job, Copilot, on that. But look at the kind of a shield. I kind of like this eagle. It's eagle. It's a national symbol of the country. It's you know kind of like that. I don't know. I like that Trantham Associates, the actual name of the firm, is a little higher in the image too. If you have Trantham Associates way down at the bottom, you're like, what am I looking at? But okay, you got the logo, Trantham Associates, on trust integrity, scam containment. I might ideally switch those two just so our trust integrity is below that line and Trantham Associates and Scandal's a little close together. But that's a minor thing, and I could prompt to do that if I wanted to. So yeah, Copilot, Copilot
Pretty
wins.
good.
All right, Candace. So let's check out Ideogram. This is our last AI tool that I worked with the students on. And why I like Ideogram AI is because if I have the same uh, prompting that I did, in this box above, look what it gives me at the end. There we go. You can see it, I think, there. So it actually gives me four options for the logo, which I think is really cool. So not just, here's the logo that you get, which is what we've seen so far. But you can actually click any of these four that you want. So that's kind of cool. I don't love this logo. It's much too dark, I think. This one, the shield's maybe a little too small, the words are a little too small. Kind of like this one. If I were in like ancient Rome, reminds me of the ancient Greece, right? That's kind of the crowns they used to wear back then. But yeah, this Trantham Associates, I like this first one. So if we did like this first one, we could just click on it and we could download it and save it. We'd be all good to go. So it's I do like it. You get options now because otherwise you have to kind of um, restart the image process. But here you can pick. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's really cool too because it incorporated the text into the image rather than putting it below like the other two. That one that's smaller, what I like about it is the where it says honor, trust, integrity, and it has little lines and that's really clean design. That's very clean.
Sure.
These are some cool tools.
And I
It's,
think this is nice too. If I had the students work in groups to create a logo, they could look at these four options. They could discuss which ones they wanted. So this may lend itself to having at least partner work. You have not small groups as well, so they can have a discussion there. And which image do we want, and all of that as well.
yeah, it gets them critically thinking too about what their image says and how that relates to the scandal and their firm and forming those relationships and discussing, building that like real peer connection through generation of images, which is really cool.
But all
So
right,
let think.
yeah. So I'm just going to stop
Oh,
sharing. There we go. Okay, there we go.
Okay. So since we just mentioned students, let's talk a little bit about that student side. So what have your students taught you about using AI image generators? Any misconceptions, surprising uses, or pushback that kind of gave you a little pause? Any like ethics or authenticity things?
So much. My students teach me things every day. I always tell them I'll learn more from you than you will learn from me on the first day of the term, and AI was no exception. I, I found out what Grok is. It's your X's version of AI. I had no idea, and we're doing an AI text based exercise in one of the classes, and the students like, oh, here's Dr. T. I'm like, what is Grok? What is this? Oh, that's X's version of AI. I'm like, that's cool. Didn't know that. So anyway, yes, always learning, but with images as well. I've been able to be a student, which is refreshing. It really is. So I think what I learned more than anything, though, Candace, was that our students still, their skills, the kind of native skills of AI still vary a lot. Like I said, there's a lot that sort of get it and they're just like, let's go. And there's some that, what is this? I'm a little nervous, or I just don't want to do it. And yeah, there's some that's like, I'm just not going to do it. So you've got these kind of, gradations of AI use. So I think that the AI um, initiatives that CETO is still going to work on. I think will help with that. But yeah, so I think one student's infographic misspelled the word Florida. So we were not telling AI to spell things correctly because Florida like had an H in it or something at the end. I don't know what it was, but it was a little crazy. But one student really had a cool infographic, and they wrote this is for the Congress course, but they wrote on the Veterans Mental Health Support Act of 2025. So they're writing on veterans mental health, and so they want their AI to really, or the image based had really detailed some of the sobering stats about that issue. And so they had stats in there about the daily suicide rate. They had the presence of like PTSD and like other mental health challenges that our veterans go through, like to better symbolize the core idea of the bill, which was increased staffing. So let's have statistics to kind of demonstrate the need for more staffing. So I thought that was really cool. Another student in the Congress class had the Hearing Protection Act of 2025, and their goal was to protect the hearing of those who use guns by allowing suppressors to be used. And they actually had anything over 70 decibels is actually damaging. So think about any of the concerts that we've gone to lately. And then decibel levels while shooting high caliber rifles actually 175 decibels. That's over 100 decibels more than what we're, with kind of a safe level. So that was interesting. I had no clue about that. They used red, white, and blue to give a patriotic look to the company itself as one of the scandal logos. They also used red, white, and blue. So I thought that was cool. So kind of again, I didn't prompt them to do that, but they did that on their own. Interestingly, none of them really questioned the ethical nature or authenticity of the images they were producing, which I found interesting. I thought somebody would say something. They really didn't. One person did remark on their end of course evaluation that they wish they could have worked the assignment with a non AI based image program like Canva, and obviously this kind of defeats the purpose of an AI based image assignment. But it taught me that even though some of our students are thinking real outside the box, using statistics and things I never would have expected them to do, some are still very slowly coming to the world of AI, and it's a slower embrace than maybe I thought it was going to be with Gen Z. They've grown up with social media. These are students, and they're just going to love this. And there's still a more indifference, nonchalantness than I thought. So, and I think, but that's why it's important to do AI, image based and just AI assignments. Period, is to understand that. To understand where are our students with tech, tech. And I think sometimes like we assume they're a little, they're going to love it right off the bat, and it's not the case all the time.
No, I think there's a lot of assumption that they're gonna love it. They're all using it. We kind of assume that that's happening, but from what I've heard from you and others, that's not really the case. There's a lot of pushback even from among our students. There's varying attitudes towards it. And not to say one way is right or wrong, like that's just it, is how it is and how people feel about it. So it's really interesting to hear those perspectives. Let's see. So I was thinking about that kind of bigger picture because when you're zooming out and you're really looking at that student as a whole, like this entire class, you've got, people all the way over here you adopting, and then we've got people in the middle that are kind of like, I don't know, I'll try it. And then, some that are a little more skeptical because it is a tool to be cautious with that makes sense. But zooming out, what do you think your experience with AI image generation in the classroom tells us about where higher education is heading? How might this shift visual literacy or creative thinking in the political science arena? Um, what advice would you give a professor who's curious about AI but kind of unsure or skeptical? Like they're kind of with the students on the other end. They're not quite sure.
Right. No, absolutely. And so, as we all know, since the fall 2022, about 3 years ago, AI use is rapidly impacting higher, higher, higher ed. So I remember when AI first came out, I was on a walk and talk with Candace Roberts, and we were talking about AI and what we're going to do in the classroom. I said, well, this is our chance, isn't it? This is our chance to not assign a 10-page term paper anymore. Let's do something creative and cool and interesting and new. The students will be like, wow, this is really interesting, right? So it makes our fields interesting, even to the majors that are take 5 or 6 or 7 classes in the same subject. We want to keep them engaged as well. So that's where that started with that conversation. But yeah, I think faculty really having to rethink and re-visualize, reimagine how they're going to teach their content. And obviously AI is a great thing. And so using image-based assignments for me is a way to reconceptualize standard content while allowing instructors, faculty members more freedom to create these kind of creative assignments to satisfy student learning outcomes in their course. And so when we think about democracy, well, like what's that really look like? Is that people voting? Is it not revolting? Is it press freedom? What is that? And so I think we can really start to visualize these thoughts in our head, obviously, with images. So, again, in for, um, poli sci, being able to see something that I mentioned earlier, the sheer number of just things in politics that are visually based. Posters during campaigns, photographs, propaganda, like all those things. So if our students were to graduate from our program and work on a campaign, and the boss tells them, hey, we need a new logo, or the candidate needs a new logo, they can use AI to make that right away, and so there's no learning curve. And so I want them to have that readiness professionally, and then it's like, well, okay, this logo is great, but how do we get Gen Z involved? How do we get senior citizens involved? Well, they can make different logos that might use different aspects of that candidate's campaign that would resonate with those different groups. We call it micro targeting. It happens all the time. You're using different images, different words, different topics to um, uh, be accessible and show relevance to different segments of the population. So I can see AI helping you do the same thing. you know, and I have colleagues, and great. There are other institutions, and we've talked about AI. And they're like, oh, I don't know, Austin, I'm not sure about this. I said, well, start small, start what you're comfortable with doing. Write a simple prompt, have the students work together on creating an image from that prompt. You could tell them, find an AI program, or even tell them, find Chat GPT, because we've seen that works well. Here's your prompt. It can be very structured, and then have them have discussion over time. By the next week or next few weeks after, you might add an element for collaboration, where you've got the second group, and their job is to look at the first group's image and prompt AI to modify it in some way. So you could have them do some group work, and then after a while, after they're comfortable with prompting and what a good prompt looks like, have them write their own prompts to create their own images while you're sort of walking around and observing and guiding as needed. That gives the instructor the time to sort of figure out their own comfort level um, uh, with AI. And remember, right, some of the students, they're going to be like our novice instructor. They're going to be new to AI. They're going to need to explore. They're going to kind of search through things. So I hope that any initial skepticism um, toward AI would decrease over time as people, as my faculty colleagues really realize how powerful images are to really enhance and level up, our standard uh, what discussions in our activities to be more engaging. And since you're making an image in real time, that's really fun too. It's like, oh, well, we just did this. What if we change the image this way? And then we can actually work through that process, in real time. So that's a lot of fun.
I think that it's really important about the opportunity that you're pointing out. It opens up an opportunity for concrete visualization of concepts. Because, like when you said, what is democracy? My brain is like struggling to put an image on that because there are so many dimensions to it. And when you are working to create an image about that, you have to think through all of those things. And you can't just use the word. You have to think about what does that word mean in order to visualize it. So I think that's a really critical connection for education is that you can use image generation, image creation to get your students critically thinking and going deeper. I know that's like the big thing we're concerned about is that cognitive, was it, cognitive laziness that can happen, that over reliance on AI, and we're really concerned for our students. But you put in these structures that make them think. You can't just make an image. It needs to say something. It needs to do something. That logo has to represent you. So you can't just make a random, that's very cool. So just fun question. If you had no budget constraints, ideal world, total freedom, what's your dream course or project involving AI image generation? What would you do with it?
Oh, the last question's a toughie, isn't it? No, I think I would enjoy having a course just based on political images. Literally, I would, and I have had colleagues that literally they have a course. It's all project based learning. Their goal was not have one lecture in the course. I'm not sure if I could ever get down to that, but have a course where you're really the spoken word is gone and you're really focusing on images and what that means. So how I might think about that is, the main course assignments would all tie into image making in some form or another. So, if we're examining certain political systems, so like what's an authoritarian government look like? What's fascism look like? If we're studying, if we're studying elections, we could go back to the campaign example and use those AI to how do we persuade voters to support my um, um, uh, 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 support my candidate. You design a symbol of the presidency, right? What is it? Is it the White House? Is it the Oval Office? Is it Mount Rushmore? What is it? So I think you'd really do something cool with just really doubling down on images as a as a unifying theme throughout the whole course. And so if we could think we could think about a prompt where we say you're imagining all creative content for a younger candidate running for office, Gen Z. It actually this happens because some mayors in the country actually win election and they're 15, 16, 17, done 20. So this happens. But, a design the media platform for this candidate. If we got to international affairs, so we're studying foreign policy, the AI images could then focus on illustrating global diplomacy, military action. So if like I'm a decision maker and I want to think about these options for engaging with country X, what's an image of what that might look like if I did that? So I think really basing a course on image making would allow active learning to just be really present, you're really explicit. But I think the students, because they are Gen Z, they would have a different way to perceive the political world around them. Because obviously, as we talked about, they've been up for social media, so reading a textbook isn't always the thing they love to do so much. So I think really meeting them where they are, with creating content, with again pr- pr- producing content themselves, and not just having the instructor show them a bunch of images and, well, let's have a discussion, which is fine, as a start, of course. But how, how do we take it farther? How do we take it in the next step so that they're making these images, and then they leave the course with a tangible skill that they can use the courses, they can use, as they graduate and go into fields where obviously technology, is the key to success.
Exactly. They're leaving with relevant skills, and I want to take this course. That would be a very fun course. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk with us about all this cool stuff you're doing in your classroom. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Cass. It was my pleasure.